Hello my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Navigating Wellness. Now there's a food that is so ubiquitous out there, it's so common in so many people's diets. It's in fact a dietary staple. It's one food that I know I ate regularly when I was growing up, and I'm sure many people do consume it regularly as well. However, I found that this food is actually a key culprit to triggering acid reflux symptoms. And I'm not going to keep it shrouded out in this mystery. The food that I'm talking about is regular potatoes. Your conventional, everyday yellow potatoes, red potatoes, russet potatoes. These potatoes are actually very problematic when it comes to acid or triggering acid reflux symptoms. And I'm not talking about things like sweet potatoes or yams. They have a different structure. They tend to be much more easier on the digestive system. However, what I found through trial and error is that regular potatoes can tend to be quite challenging for our digestive system to actually process and often end up triggering acid reflux symptoms. Now, many of you may say, well, most people today are consuming potatoes as fries, as chips, and the means of preparation of these foods is actually what is causing the acid reflux symptoms. So when we think about fries, they often deep fried in highly inflammatory oils that are not changed and continuously being used to fry, to create these fries. And so it's very easy for us to blame the preparation process instead of the food itself. And I also thought that was the reason why potatoes tend to be a key trigger for acid reflux symptoms. However, through my experimentation, I started to recognize that yes, those factors do play a critical role and potentially make the symptoms even worse. However, even when I used organic potatoes and prepared it through much more delicate preparation process like steaming or boiling, where you don't add these highly inflammatory oils to the food itself, it still ended up triggering acid reflux symptoms. And so that's what made me question why so many of these alternative health practitioners are actually advocating going on a mono-only potato diet to help resolve acid reflux symptoms or other health complications. However, why is it that this food is still triggering acid reflux symptoms when so many are advocating for it? And it may differ depending on what your health condition is or what chronic health condition you're suffering from. But generally what I found is that conventional or regular potatoes tend to be very high in resistant starch and tend to be very burdensome on the diet, on the digestive system, which in fact creates this huge burden on our digestive system. And when we have this inability to process through these hard to digest foods, it's very easy for these foods to then trigger these acid reflux symptoms. Because when I experimented with this and I started to recognize that it was only happening with the consumption of regular potatoes and not sweet potatoes, meaning that the starch profile of regular potatoes is very different. And because it's so resistant and it's so high in the starch, it's very easy for this food to become a burden to our digestive system. And then what I also came across is that it also has some kind of compound which is called glycocolloids, which is actually known to be a gut irritant and further aggravates these symptoms of acid reflux and the irritation in our gut. So this is one of my short videos to hopefully help add more perspective on foods that may be considered by many as helping to resolve acid reflux symptoms, but are in fact doing the contrary. So if you're someone that's experiencing the same thing from consuming regular potatoes, you might want to give it a second thought. This is something I had experimented with through trial and error. So as always, do your own research, but maybe this helps to give you a better perspective on certain foods that may be triggering acid reflux symptoms, even though the mainstream alternative health may be advocating this specific food. Sometimes it's about listening to your own body and finding out what foods actually work for you and your digestive system. So as always, I hope this helped, and I'll see you in my next video.